Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. I'm excited to have on today my guest, and that is Chad Hufford. And let me tell you about Chad. He is and has been born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska. I could have a whole podcast about that whole situation. So Chad grew up in the financial industry, but also developed a strong background in athletics, nutrition, and performance psychology. Chad brings a coaching mindset and the heart of a teacher to financial planning and investing as he strives to both empower and educate his audience to not only become better investors, but the more intentionally and create an abundant life. Chad is Dave Ramsey's Smart Investor Pro, owns a boutique financial planning firm, Veritas Wealth Management, that manages $500 million and serves several hundred families across the U.S. In addition to finance, he regularly teaches and speaks on fitness and faith, seeing these as all important aspects for a purposeful and abundant life. Chad and his wife, Tiffany, also a lifelong Alaskan, have been blessed with 6 children. Tiffany stays homeschooling the kids, and the whole family is very involved in their church and local community. I thought we would talk today about choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Please join me in welcoming Chad Hufford.
Vicki,
well, Chad,
first
question. How do you love living in Alaska? Is it a right in Anchorage, or is it a small town outside of there?
So Anchorage is a relatively small town, but it's the largest town by far in Alaska. It's about 300,000 people. Alaska as a whole has about 700,000 people. So almost half of our population lives in Anchorage. But Alaska is about 750,000 square miles. So as a state, we have less than one person per square mile. So just gives you an idea how spread out it is. Little trivia question for your audience. Alaska is both the easternmost and westernmost state, because Alaska, the Aleutian chain actually is in the eastern hemisphere. So one state is both the eastern boundary and the western boundary of the United States. And you asked, how do I like living here? I'm glad you asked it this week, because last week we had 5 straight days of 25 below. And I was second guessing some of my life decisions, and Georgia was probably sounding pretty good about that.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
No, we love it here. It's a wilderness. It's we live in Anchorage, but we live on the very edge. So we have moose and bear that come through our yard. We have lynx that come through, and our yard backs up against parkland. So behind our house, there's nothing but miles and miles of wilderness and woods and animals, and it's amazing. So I'm 15 minutes from my office, but the Alaska wilderness is right out our back door. It's perfect.
Nice. I had my brother and his first wife took a trip. She worked for National Geographic, and so they had her write a story, and they flew up into some part of Alaska, remote part of Alaska, where they had to prove that they could shoot a gun before they got approved for it. They had this little teeny plane that took them there, and it wasn't coming back for 2 weeks, but they had to have a month's worth of food.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing, it was fantastic experience for them, but it was just like all these precautions if something would go wrong. So it was quite interesting.
Well, my son and I we were on a trip last year on a caribou hunt, and you forget just how harsh and unforgiving places in the US still can be. I mean, there's places in Wyoming and Montana, there's places all over that like this, but in Alaska, we still have all the modern technology, but you can be cut off from that so easily. And we were in a situation where I was like, you know what, we've got to be pretty careful because we didn't have cell phone reception and we got separated from our group. And as beautiful as it is, it can be, like I said, unforgiving. And it's just that reminder. It's amazing how comfortable we get in our normal everyday lives with all these amenities that didn't even exist 10 years ago, but they can all disappear pretty quickly when you get out in the Alaska wilderness. So I think it's very grounding to have those experiences.
And it also is to teach you the lessons of not relying on all of those technologies and things. If they're not there, can you still get home?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So let's just get into this, the hard right over the easy wrong, and share a little bit about your backstory. I often love to hear the stories about, I read in the bio generally all of your accolades of what you've done professionally and personally, but I love to hear the story of the young Chad getting out of college. What were your dreams and how did you get to where you are today? So it's always interesting to hear that.
Well, if we go back even a little bit further than that, I think it's important context to know that I was homeschooled in the 80s. It was not cool back then. It's probably not super cool now, but I was a dork. And it was, let's just say it this way. There's a reason that homeschooling had its stereotypes, because the kids that were homeschooled back in the 80s earned those stereotypes.
Yeah, I know.
And the point of that is I got used to being different at a very young age. And I did not like it. I wanted so much to belong and fit in. But that's a big part of this idea of the hard right over the easy wrong is, as I've grown up, I've realized how valuable that lesson is to be willing to be different. Not just for different sake, but doing different because the way that we live today has normalized so much bad behavior, whether it's bad health behavior, bad financial behavior, poor relationships. Renee Brown says that we are the most obese, over-medicated, in debt, and anxiety-ridden culture ever to walk the earth. And she's right. We have all these modern conveniences, but we've normalized unhealthy behavior. So growing up in that environment, I learned to be okay with choosing the narrow path, with not doing what everybody else was doing. And that really, I think, set the stage, set the foundation for a lot of the other building blocks in my life. Athletics was a big part of that. I learned that people will cheer you on and celebrate on game day all the work that you did in private. So they don't get to see the workouts and the mundane drills where we just went over the fundamentals and worked on the basics over and over and over again. And if we did that well enough, we would be celebrated on game day. And it was just this whole idea of being praised in public for what you do in private. And I think that initiated a lot of this performance psychology mindset I didn't know a lot about, but it got me interested in that. Because investing is not about the tools you have access to, the strength of the investments themselves, as much as how you use them. So the psychology and behavior of the individual is incredibly important. Just like Getting a faster treadmill doesn't make you a better runner. Getting a better pair of basketball shoes doesn't make you a better jumper. It's training the individual. So all of those elements, I think, created that foundation. But to get back to your question, my professional pursuit as a young adult was medicine. My degree is in biochemistry, and that's what I was going after. And I realized that a lot of the coaching and the background that I had was very well suited to that environment. But I wasn't really thinking about finance until a few years later. I'd finished my biochemistry program and was struggling with creating a work-life balance and realizing that medicine, at least for me, the way I'm wired, may not be the path to create a situation where I could be an excellent father and husband and be excellent in my profession. And I think wealth coaching and financial management, retirement planning has allowed me the chance to be excellent in both domains. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, you had probably a lot of exposure to people that would need your wealth management too. From medical, does have to hit to your budget for some people.
Absolutely.
So, how does someone start planning their financial future? You know, you often hear you should start when they're young, but a lot of people don't. So, what advice do you give folks about starting their planning?
Well, you're right. The sooner you start, the better. But I think some people use that as an excuse to continue to delay because maybe they're 45, 50 years old and like, I should have started on 25. It's too late now. Well, I believe your future begins today. And the best time to start may have been 20 years ago, but the next best time is right now. And people need to take advantage of that because the sooner you start, even if you're getting a late start, the sooner you start, the less work you have to do. And I think part of that workload is some of that intimidation factor. People don't know what they don't know. And it's kind of like a little kid being afraid to look underneath the bed. They're afraid of seeing a monster under there. And when people look at financial planning, they're afraid of what they might find. They're afraid of being confronted by how much debt they've accumulated, maybe bad spending habits, being confronted with how little they've saved, all those different things. One of the big questions we hear a lot about is, am I on track? Am I behind? And if I am, what do I need to do to get back on track? And a lot of times people are afraid to know the answer to that. And I know that you speak a lot to entrepreneurs, encouraging them. And it's the same thing in business. A lot of times we don't face the difficult questions because I think we're afraid of hearing the answer. So when you talk about choosing the hard right, sometimes that's simply being willing to face the question. What do I need to fix? What do I need to change? And are my current choices in alignment with where I want to be in the future, the person that I say I want to become? That right there is a big step that keeps a lot of people from even beginning the process because they're not willing to face that question.
Yeah. So if you're faced with that question, then the question is, what habits do you have today that are either helping or hurting you? So how do we instill better habits or having a mindset that's one that will be healthier for our financial future, I guess?
What it really comes down to, Vicki, is creating a better relationship with our future self and looking at how to serve the future version of us rather than steal from the future version of us. And I believe every decision we make either serves or steals from future us. And the nice thing about having a financial blueprint for your life is you can see, are my current actions in alignment with my future goals? And without that, it's really easy to make mistakes, to choose the easy right, which might be pleasurable or easy in the moment, but make our lives harder in the future. So that's why I often start these conversations with, again, it's the courage to dare to be different. Because if we do what everybody else is doing, we're going to end up where everybody else is going. And for most people, That's not a good place. So the average retiree, 65 years and over, relies on Social Security as their primary source of income. So they might be retired, but they're still dependent on the government to be able to make their ends meet and be able to pay their bills. Of those 50%, about half of them rely on Social Security for 90% of their income or more. So there's a huge percentage of our retired population that is still basically living dollar to dollar, paycheck to paycheck, relying on the next Social Security check coming through. They're not self-sustainable. They have debt. They still live in scarcity. That's normal. So it's being willing to say, I don't want to sign up for that. I'm willing to do the difficult thing. I'm willing to choose the hard road now to make my life easier in the future. And we have to be able to get around that, to delay gratification and realize that it's not so much a sacrifice. It may feel like that in the moment, but it's serving the future version of you and creating a roadmap, a blueprint, connecting those two people, current you, future you. That's what a business plan does for your entrepreneur audience. We're looking at, okay, here's where our business is today. Here's where we want it to be in the future. What are the steps necessary? What are the things I have to either invest in or pay for or sacrifice today to get the business to where I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And a lot of your entrepreneurs, they have that for their business, but they don't have it for their lives. They don't have it for their finances. So it's that same type of work about living intentionally, working towards long-term strategic objectives. So we're not reacting to this crazy world around us.
Yeah, I think the last 3 years kind of taught us all that. How do you establish a good relationship with your future self? And I also want to kind of touch on some of the people that I've interviewed have talked about, the past, our relationship with money hampers sometimes our future. What we think about money, how our family was treated money, and that kind of rubbed off on us, kind of thing. So, if you will.
So what you're saying is absolutely correct. A lot of times we drag our past experiences and past perspectives of money into our current decisions. And a lot of those past perspectives were developed by default, not by design, and they're not necessarily healthy. They could be old scars. I have them. I mean, I remember in the early days of my business, not sure how I was going to pay the bills, how I was going to be able to buy groceries. Some of those scars of scarcity are still there, but I'm at least mindful of them. I just had a conversation with my wife a couple of weeks ago. We're looking at some expenditures and wondering, just kind of budget some of these things out. And I felt this like tense up. I'm like, no, I'm not that same person. We have the money set aside to do these things. We should enjoy it. But some of those scars still remain. And to your point, I think a lot of us grew up in households where the only time money was talked about was in a negative context, where mom and dad were fighting about it, or there wasn't enough money, or somebody made a big financial mistake and the family was reeling from the consequences of that. So money often has become taboo because it was an uncomfortable subject and people have learned to ignore it. So it's important to get clear about the baggage that people bring to their financial table, so to speak, but also to your question about building up a better vision or better relationship with their future self. It's getting clear, not just about what you've overcome, but where you want to be and having a vision for what you want your life to look like and attaching meaning and purpose to money. Because being financially independent should be more than just being able to retire. It should be bigger than just, hey, I can quit my job now. Like people work their tails off for 30 years. It has to be more compelling than just, well, I've worked super hard. I've saved a lot of money. Now I can quit my job. That's not a big enough goal. It's not a big enough why. So attaching meaning to money, one of the questions I ask people all the time is, if you never needed a paycheck ever again, you didn't need to run your business, you didn't need to show up to your job, you didn't need the paycheck, how would your life be different? What would you be wanting to do with your time you can't do right now? What would you be wanting to do with your money if there was a surplus? What would be that meaningful pursuit that would get you up in the morning? Because it's not just enough to have meaning. Meaning and purpose is great, but there's something about pursuit. We need to be chasing something because we're not chasing the right things. We're often chasing the wrong things. And when it comes to this idea of retirement in this country, in this culture, too often the focus is what we're fleeing, what we're moving away from. We're leaving this job, we're leaving the stress, we're leaving whatever issues people are dealing with. And that's important. That's important to know why we are turning over that page and entering a new chapter of our life. But what do we want that new story to look like? So you've left your career. What are you retiring to? What will be your meaningful pursuit in this new chapter of life? And a lot of people don't get really clear about that. And I think if we had a clearer vision of what we're building towards, it'd be easier to make the sacrifices in the moment, and we'd be more motivated because we're living towards something so much more than quitting our job. And I think all of those things help us have excitement for the future and can distance ourselves, or at least repair some of the damage from our past.
And I think that's a really important point, because a lot of times, I have people come on and we talk about purpose, and I've been retired now several years. And for me, I'm having fun now, more so than I did when I was working, and I loved my jobs. But you hear the stories of people that retire and their health goes down and their attitude gets poor. And I think it's because they've lost purpose. And so if you, can have a job or even doing volunteering, if you have the money that you don't need the paycheck, and you do something that's giving you a reason to get up every day, I do think that it helps to keep you living longer and healthier.
And not only does it keep you living longer and healthier, but it also allows more life in those years. Some people might be alive for 20 years past retirement, but they slowly stop living. And that's not what we want for people. And what you said is so important. Like, yeah, you need something to still get you up in the morning. You need to be challenged. Entrepreneurs, more than anybody, like your audience, Vicki, they're the worst type of people to wake up and have 25 years of Saturdays ahead of them. They need to be challenged. They need to be stretched. And that stretch doesn't need to be making money anymore when you get to that place of financial freedom, that place of financial independence. But you do still need something that gives you that, I got to get ready for this, that it might even scare you a little bit. And but the only way to continue to grow and continue to learn is to be stretched, to be in uncomfortable situations, and to continue to choose the hard right over the easy wrong. That doesn't get to stop just because you've retired, just because you've hit a place of financial independence, because you're right, other areas of your life will diminish if you don't have that purposeful and meaningful pursuit.
And when you talk about doing stuff that kind of scares you, I always say the confidence comes from courage, and courage is exercised every time you stretch yourself and do something that is different outside of your comfort zone. And so when you do that, there's a lot of times where you're going to fall on your face and hopefully get back up. So how do you cope with failure? And how can, if you do fail, how can you get your mindset back to overcome it, to rise up, to understand that it's okay? Especially, when it comes to money, people are a little bit leery of failing in that area, especially.
Absolutely. And you have to realize that, first of all, setbacks are a normal part of life, and they're a normal part of investing. I mean, we're in the process of coming out of the longest market decline since the Great Recession.
Yes.
The S&P 500 was down for 2 years. To a lot of people, that felt like failure. Now it's a setback, but I think we need to view our life. I might use a metaphor that not everybody's going to understand or get, but a lot of people look at optimism as a staircase where every step takes you a little bit higher. Every step is a little bit better. And that's not how optimism works. In fact, I think a lot of people are looking at optimism as an escalator. They just want to stand there and this thing just takes them. but it's
Yeah.
more like a mountain range. And here in Alaska, we're surrounded by mountains. I
Mhm.
live on the side of one, and they're jagged. Sometimes you have
Mhm.
to cross valleys in order to continue climbing. And the way I want to look at optimism is looking at, I will be at an elevated place. I will be at a better place in the future, but there might be a lot of storms and valleys that I have to overcome. There's going to
Mm.
be trials and tribulations and setbacks in between. So I'm not looking for every step to take me up. I'm just looking at every step to take me further. And yeah, I might have to walk down before I can keep climbing sometimes. That's a normal part of business. It's a normal part of investing, and it's a normal part of life. So the way I look at failure is more as a learning experience.
Yeah.
And in my line of work, there's a lot of failure. I experienced a lot early on when I didn't have the network. I didn't have the name recognition or the reputation that by
Mhm.
God's grace I've been able to build. So it was a lot of what felt like jumping out of the bushes at people, Vicki, saying like, "Hey, you don't know me, but how would you like
But
to
give me all your
entrust
money.
how would you like to entrust your family's financial future to a complete stranger?" As you can imagine, I experienced a lot of rejection, and I used to experience that as failure. But then I learned to experience that as feedback and celebrate the input. The outcome, whether or not that person chose to engage with me, hire me, or even schedule an appointment, I couldn't control that. What I could do is control how many people that I introduced myself to and presented myself as a potential solution to some of the problems they were having. A lot of times I heard no, but every time I learned from the
Mhm.
experience, and viewing failure as a learning experience helped me shift my mindset to where I no longer looked at failure as failure, but I looked at it as feedback and almost like an experiment, which is where my biochemistry background came in.
Mm.
I realized we did a lot of things in the lab that didn't go the way that we anticipated, but we learned from it. And if business owners and if people tried new things, if they stepped into unknown territory, less tied to the outcome and more looking as an opportunity to learn from the experience, we would view failure in a much different way.
That's so true. My career that I retired from was a project lead and a project manager for both technology and other types of processes. And so the last project I had was a technology project that was testing, introducing new ideas and new processes and new equipment. And so luckily we were an agile project, but it was one of those things that some of the older people were having a hard time not seeing success. But it was new technology. It was new things that you couldn't go to anybody and ask, well, when this happens, what do we do? Because nobody knew. And I found it exciting and wonderful, but a little bit of stress, but still I think that's what makes you want to get up every day, is to think, okay, I have this huge problem. How can I solve it? And use those brain cells. And it's the same thing with finances and now with the introduction of AI, and how is that going to help us be better managers of our finances and different things? What tools are going to come out to help us there?
Well, you started this conversation asking about choosing the hard right, rather than the easy wrong. And I think it very much relates to this because if the only difference between being in a groove and being stuck in a rut is how long you stay there.
Yes.
And too often we find success in one area and we get comfortable. Well, success leads to comfort, and comfort, if we're not careful, leads to complacency.
Yeah.
And when you get to that point where comfort has evolved into complacency, you don't want to move. You don't want to try anything new because you've been comfortable for too long. So I think, to your point, trying things new, stepping into unknown territory is so important. It's a habit. It's a discipline that we need to be constantly doing. It's like an exercise, or it's like a muscle you need to exercise. If you don't use it, it gets weak. So
Mm.
whether you need to innovate or try new things in your business, or whether you're just trying something new because you realize it's good for your soul and for who you are as a person, I think it's a constant habit that we need to be dedicated to. And my wife just started playing piano after 35 years of not playing it. She just started picking it up again. And I have a client that just started playing the guitar. Another client that they started trying to learn how to do rose mauling, which is like it's a Norwegian art thing. I don't even understand it, but it's like very intricate art. The point being, they're stepping into new territory, and sometimes into territory where other people are experts, and they're the newbie, and it's a little embarrassing and it's intimidating, and it human beings have a really hard time dealing with ambiguity, and a lot of times we live in certainty to the place where it actually becomes harmful. And if we live in certainty for too long, then when ambiguity is forced on us, like it was in 2020, we don't know how to react to it. So I think living in a place of ambiguity where we learn how to tolerate that is very important, because as an investor, you don't know what the economy is going to do. You don't know what the stock market is going to do. The people that say they do are lying to you. We have to be willing to tolerate ambiguity and allow that into our life as a necessary part of every day going forward.
Yeah. That is so true. Well, time's flying by. We'll have to have a podcast to continue the conversation. One last rapid fire. So a quick question. Are there some critical components to living a life of abundance? Maybe one or two. What two components maybe?
The biggest thing, Vicki, is gratitude. Gratitude allows you to see more clearly what you already have. So much of our life is focusing on what others have that we want. Gratitude teaches you to pay more attention to what is already yours. And when it comes to money, money will never tell you that there's enough. Your wealth, your bank account, your investments will never tell you, okay, we're full now. We don't need any more. You have to be the one telling them, I'm grateful, I'm content. It doesn't mean we don't still pursue, but the idea of gratitude is so important. And it is an integral part of not just being a good investor, but of being a good person and living a healthy life.
Awesome. All right. So if you all have enjoyed hearing what Chad has had to say and really want to have further conversation, I have his contact information on the slide as always. So let me share my slide with you. If you're just listening, you should have had a paper and pencil all along. But if you haven't, run and get that right now so that you can get this information. Of course, it is going to be on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, as well as findyourleadershipconfidence.com. All right, that gave you enough time to get that paper pencil. Here we go. Website is veritasalaska.com. That's veritasalaska.com. veritasalaska.com. On LinkedIn, you can just search his name, Chad Hufford, and Facebook is Veritas Wealth Management. Instagram is veritas.alaska, and YouTube is at Veritas Alaska. I'm going to turn it over now to Chad to let you know what you'll find when you go to the website and to those social media platforms. Chad, it's all yours.
Well, Veritas Alaska is our main website where we have a lot of the tools and some of the services that we offer to ensure that people don't run out of money or purpose in retirement, and help them connect their current action, their current plans to their long-term goals. We've gotten a lot better on Instagram of having regular content, encouraging educational content put up there every day, not just to encourage people in their finances, but again, encouraging them into living a more abundant life. And the last thing I want to mention real quick is the book that will be coming out as this is released, Forging Financial Freedom. They can visit forgingfinancialfreedom.com. And it's going to talk a lot about the mindsets and the perspectives that we just talked about, Vicki, but it's the mindsets necessary to create lasting, sustainable wealth and to be able to enjoy it, to really experience freedom and abundance.
Awesome. So once again, the name of the book is Forging Financial Freedom. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And go to forgingfinancialfreedom.com.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Well, Chad, it's been wonderful having this conversation with you. Whenever I start my second podcast, it's just a conversation where I'm talking to all cool people. We'll talk all about Alaska.
All right. No, thank you so much for having me. This was truly a pleasure. It was an uplifting conversation for me, and it's been a privilege to share some of my experience with your audience.
Yeah, and you gave so many great tips and insights, so I appreciate that. And as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.